and women. So it was natural for participants to have selected this thematic. So to address this thematic, we have to look into some of the issues. First of all, what are the inclusion mechanisms for women, young ones, and vulnerable groups? So we have to look into such so that we be able to assess to what extent these groups of people access this mechanism. Secondly, we are going to look what are the scopes and limits when it comes to politics, an inclusion of women and young people and vulnerable people. And then we'll address some recommendations we could make on this thematic towards policy makers and various stakeholders so as to improve the involvement of women and youths and vulnerable groups in the local management so that no one would be marginalized. So these are some of the issues around which our webinar is organized. And we have two speakers, a lady and a man, to be in the light of gender. And the first to take the floor is Chorosa, who is a communication manager at COSEV. She has other functions, and I'm going to talk about it in her biography. And afterward, we are going to listen to Jan Hopwood, the representative of UNICEF in Senegal from 2000 and 2008. And he is the honorary chairman of Sen-Eval, so an evaluation group in Senegal. We also have a rapporteur, Dr. Valérie Loba, who is a researcher and a teacher at the University Félix Houphouët-Boigny of Côte d'Ivoire. I hope you are connected here, you have joined us, and you are with us on this platform. So three of you, you are warmly welcome. And on behalf of all, I would like to warmly sure that you are welcome. So the webinar will be from 10 to 12 p.m. So then there will be 20 minutes for each speaker. Afterwards, there will be debate, so the floor will be open for comments and questions. And then Dr. Valérie Loba, as a rapporteur, will have to share a summary of what may have been shared during the discussions. And then we are going to close the webinar. So now let me introduce Madam Chorosa, who is going to be the first to take the floor. Shara has a master in communication and a master in science of education from the University of Lorraine 2. And she has a political science degree. And also she has a degree in teaching. And she was an excellent student. She's currently in charge of communication of the COREP. I've worked with her. I know what she has been doing, especially COSEP, that the organization. I've been following what you've been doing with women and your advocacy work for the change in the public policies. One of the laws is gender, the one that you have really worked on and pushed for. And so congratulations for all the work you have been doing, and welcome to this platform. Now, let me give you the floor for 20 minutes for your part on women's outlook and their inclusions in public policies. Thank you, Mr. Kanute. I hope everyone can hear me. I would like to thank you for having given me the floor. Let me start by thanking my president, the president of the National Council of Women, Madame Rokaya Tugasama, who unfortunately could not make it and asked me to represent her, my modest person. You know, I'm the youngest of the National Bureau of the Council of Women of Senegal. And it's an opportunity to thank you, Mr. Kanute, for this invitation. And I would like also to thank Mr. Hadim Gay for the coordination in charge of project at IOPD. And also I would like to thank Mr. Yan Aboud, as well as the rapporteur, Mr. Valerie Coban. Before going into the thematic itself, let me briefly present COSEF. COSEF was created on the 11th of March 1995 after 2 days of meeting in 1994 by EID, the African Institute for Democracy. The goal of that meeting was to discuss about the role women should play in democratic processes, and the COSEP's goal is to ensure that women decision making and ensure that women are involved in decision making, and that women are the core of policies and programs. So let me now share slides of my presentation, so you can click on share screen, so that for your presentation to be displayed.
Alors, tout le monde voit?
Can you see my presentation? So the theme we are going to address is youth, women, vulnerable groups, what positioning opportunities in the management of local government in Africa. So it's important we get the background of what's happening in Senegal, because we're not talking about local government without sharing the background, the context, how everything evolved, especially when it comes to the legal framework. Since its independence, Senegal has started its efforts of decentralization to build on democracy and then ensure that the local governments have the mandate to govern. We know that in 1960, we had the communes or municipalities that were created, and we are given the power to exercise. We also had the adoption in 1966 of the communal code, and there was the creation of rural communities of the law of 1962. So then that was the first time that rural communities were associated in the management of their communities. So we had sub-prefects that was created by the law of 1990. And finally, we have regions that were then adopted. So on the 1996, on the Code of Local Governments, and that was and followed by the law 2013-10 of 28 December 2013, pertaining to the Code of Local Government. So Senegal today has 557 community municipalities and 385 rural communities and 14 regions. At the international level, we know that decentralization and development are now the norm. World Bank, United Nations are promoting this government approach. The idea is that decentralization will facilitate participatory democracy and ensure that services provided are tailored to the needs of communities and that the rights of people are better upheld. It also facilitates gender balance and also favorable for women as well. We know that transformation is not always in line with decentralization. That's why it's important to be more vigilant on this. And that's why, unfortunately, some groups are sidelined, especially women. That said, Senegal has made a lot of progress on the positioning of women thanks to the law on gender that was voted in 2010. And it instituted absolute equality in all elective positions in the government. We also ratified all the legal provisions with regard to gender. Then, as for mechanisms and provisions favorable for inclusivity of and representativity of women, we are going to talk about scope and limits. Let's say that the National Assembly voted on the 28th May 2010 a law instituting absolute equality in all elective and semi-elective bodies. We know that this is to counteract the fact that women have been facing a lot of constraints and have been marginalized as well. We also have the decree 2011-1819 on the application of that law to ensure that regional councils, municipal and rural bureaus, even commissions reflect this gender balance. So we're even at the Bureau of the Economic and Social Council and all other commissions have to comply with this law and its decree of application. And this law is fully applied. We know that the government of Senegal ratified several international instruments for the protection of women's rights. We have CEDEF that was ratified in 1985, so the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And according to its first article, when we talk about discrimination, all distinction, all exclusion or restrictions based on sex, and this is in all areas, politics, economic, social, cultural. So this convention reaffirms the principle of equality, thus as requesting that all states, signatory states, ensure that women benefit fully from appropriate measures and that they enjoy progress and that their rights and liberties, fundamental liberties, are respected. We have the Maputo Protocol that was ratified in 2005, and in 2008, Senegal put in place the National Strategy for Gender Equality and Equity, SNEG. And in its 2001 Constitution, in Article 7, Paragraph 5, ensures that the law should favor equal access of women and men to mandates and electoral functions. In 2012, also, we had a gender law. So, of course, there were some reactions resisting such law, but fortunately, that law came into force because this law not only favors the representativity of women, but Senegal and France are the only countries that have such law, the law on gender. Then let me now talk about the scope and the significance of this law. We cannot talk about positioning of women without taking into account the law on gender. We know that it's useful and it has made Senegal to be ranked at the 6th in the world level. So we have 42.7% participation of women in the parliament in 2012. And so we could see the massive entry of women in the House of Assembly. So 64 women out of 86 men were MPs. It also helped to ensure that 47% of women were elected in local positions in June 2014. So no doubt that law has helped to position women in Senegal and to ensure that women's rights are rehabilitated when it comes to participation in decision-making bodies. The law has also facilitated the work of women fighting for the rights of women, and has also emboldened women's association when it comes to their advocacy. It's a law that is simple, readable, has only four paragraphs or 4 parts, and it's very clear on the fact that when it comes to elections, women should be represented in politics, and it also ensures that women are represented in local governments and the organizations of the civil society, such as the National Network, JIGEN, and we have the National Office for Gender, created during the local election a network of alert and watch those that help to nullify the commissions and bureaus that did not respect gender.
Si vous regardez, en 2010, on a appliqué la loi sur la parité, et en 2012, on a noté.
In 2020, when the law on parity was applied, in 2012, we noticed an increase of women at the parliament from 42.7% in 2012, 41.8% in 2017, and in 2022, we see that 44% of MPs are women, of which meaning 73 women elected women at the parliament. Beyond what this law on parity allows, we have seen that in Senegal, 52% of the population are women and 41% of the electing body. However, women stay underrepresented in decision-making areas. Some of these limitations include a bad understanding of parity and of the law on parity, sometimes even an instrumentalization of parity to means other than the fostering of women and women's rights. During general elections, we've seen that in different instances, the law on equality was misused and misinterpreted in election bureaus in local governments. We can also speak of social stigma, as well as incompetence and the lack of women's training, as well as the refusal of working women in political instances. We are also looking at the misunderstanding and the reluctancy of men and political parties. Women don't have their role and their place in decision-making instances. When speaking of limitations, we're also talking about taboos pertaining to the social status of women. As we all know, which considers women inferior to men, and women are very often placed in an inferior and is considered inferior to men. We can also speak of the lack of support and awareness raising and advocacy for a better representation of women, as well as the lack of a real promotion and fostering of women leadership, as well as a lack of access to funding, which reduces their independence and autonomy. Women do have access to some financing, but that does not allow them to attain full autonomy. And this hinders their political participation as well. So after speaking of the limitations of the law on gender equality, I would like to introduce some recommendations. Earlier, when speaking of the limitations, we're speaking of the lack of training, and the recommendations include capacity building for women, capacity building in leadership, for example, and the fostering of schooling and training for women, notably in rural areas, and training on gender issues. Training on gender equality could allow to harmonize knowledge around gender equality, as well as the different steps of its implementation. This would also allow to identify a situation based on facts, as well as problems which could lead to advocacy. Another recommendation would be to determine strategic alliances. Now, speaking of awareness raising and advocacy, I believe that it is also very important to have awareness raising for the efficacy of gender equality, not only with women and men, but also with political leaders, in order to allow women to occupy a role which would allow them to increase the role they play in local governments as well as other decision-making instances. We also need to raise awareness on gender equality with political parties, as I said, different decision-making bodies, and we also need to communicate more on the law on gender equality in order to increase access for women and men. We should also develop schooling programs as well as legal training for women. We also need to conceptualize and present messaging to increase the impact of this law, elaborate a fund, a resource mobilization strategy in order to support advocacy. And because women are faced with limitations, we need to reinforce political and intellectual abilities of women, as well as take measures which will incentivize women who are in the workforce to take political action. We also need to implement projects which are viable and could benefit from funding for women, as well as train political women on resource mobilization and improve access of women to real estate, which will increase their autonomy. And because without any autonomy, women could not play a role in decision-making bodies.
Nous pouvons dire que le Sénégal est loin.
I would like to end by saying that Senegal still has a long way to go in engaging in a dynamic of amending certain commissions and laws in order to improve women's access to decision-making bodies such as local governments, the parliament, etc., which will not only play a big role in lawmaking in the context of the law on gender equality, but also in order to improve women's participation in decision-making bodies. This law not only allows women to participate in political instances, but also to go beyond and allow women to have a say in decision-making policies, decision-making bodies. We also need to call upon the government to reinforce applicability disposition on gender equality with the National Observatory for Gender Equality and to guarantee its monitoring and control. We also need to call upon all civil society organizations and human rights organizations, as well as women's rights organizations, to come together as a base for a better respect of parity, of gender equality in Senegal. We also need to invite men and women to work as soldiers for this historical law. I would like to end with a quote from the president of the Council for Women, Madame Rokhaya Gassama, who says that women need to have access to different high responsibility roles. And she says that women in civil society will lead the fight in order for more women to be present in the workforce, even more in decision-making bodies. I would like to thank you for your attention and thank you for giving me the floor. Thank you very much, Madame Chorosa, for this presentation, which really introduced the details of the different mechanisms which exist with a focus on the legal aspects and the different instruments which were implemented. She also spoke of the limitations that she saw on the law and its applicability. We are talking of different limitations, lack of understanding, sociological constraints as well, and other limitations which do not foster the autonomy of women, including access to funding, as she said. And she presented a few recommendations for the fostering of the implementation of the law. In the conclusion and recommendations, Churo also spoke of calling upon the state to implement applicability dispositions, and as well as a broader participation of different actors. And she called upon women and men to play a role in applicability and implementation. I know that there are different instances which could play a role in that. You mainly work on budgeting for local governments, inclusion of women, and I know that a lot is being done in terms of different needs and challenges for women in political instances. Thank you very much for this presentation, and we would like to call upon the participant to ask questions later on. Thank you very much. You could stop sharing your screen now, which will allow us to go to our second panelist. We are going to give the floor to Jan Good. We have so much respect for Jan. He was the representative of UNICEF in Senegal from 2000 to 2008, and it is often forgotten that Jan is a teacher at Sciences Po Paris. He's a master of conference at Sciences Po Paris. He has also supported the creation and the implementation of an organization. Jan, thank you for being here. We know that you do not have a lot of time, and given all of the challenges and priorities to which you are allocating your time, thank you very much for that. And without further ado, I would like to give you the floor. You will speak of the youth and vulnerable groups pertaining to the youth, which are at the margins of public policies. Thank you very much. I believe that you have already prepared a presentation for us, which you would like maybe to share. Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you. I would like to ask my colleague to present and share their screen for me. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Bashir, for allowing me to speak to this big group. We have over 100 participants here gathering for your International Observatory for Participatory Government. And thank you very much, Madame Sa, as well for your presentation, which really highlighted the challenges in implementing change in society, not only for types of governance, but also for local governance as well. Really big challenges. And this law, this administrative law, is not enough, unfortunately, as we've seen, to implement change. And one of the lessons I believe we could learn here, and that I would like to share through my experience of over 50 years, is really that it takes a long time and that we really need to follow a path. Please excuse me if you're hearing sirens. I am at the heart of Dakar, so it can get quite noisy. And what we can really learn here is that we need to have different initiatives. We need to increase resources, and governance is quite complex.
Donc, je pense que la présentation de Mme Sarr est une
So,
bonne.
Madame Sarr's presentation is really a good introduction to what I have to say when speaking of children, youth, and vulnerable groups. There is quite a challenge because we're speaking in 15 to 20 minutes about the whole African continent and trying to be intelligible in doing so. I would like to highlight certain areas that I believe are very important and introduce perspectives as well as solutions. This PowerPoint will try to do so.
Dédicace. C'est pas toujours l'habitude, mais quand même.
It is not a habit for me, but I believe that it is important for me to dedicate this presentation to Sheikh Hamidou Khan. Sheikh Hamidou Khan who used to be the Minister of Plan in Senegal, was my first manager at UNICEF in 1972. And at the time, Cheikh Hamidou Khan had organized a conference in Lomé for francophone countries of which he was responsible for, in charge of, on the subject of youth, childhood, and women, vulnerable groups. And today, 50 years later, we're speaking of a very similar theme, a very similar topic, namely the place, the role of women, children, and youth in society. Their role in development plans back then was not recognized when we were looking at economic development. So really, I believe that it is very important to speak of these topics today with some type of humility. And we would like to look at participative governance or participative democracy in the context of a crisis. When in Benin, back then, we had spoken with Lionel Zinsou, the prime minister back then in Benin, he was saying that we needed you, the assessors, because today in Africa, we're faced with a challenge which was never faced with any human society ever in the world. We're looking at demographic increasing, very fast increase in population, recurring changes, climate change, extremism, etc., etc. So a set of challenges, and since Zinsou has said that quite a few years ago, the situation has only worsened. So we're really faced with a crisis, and this crisis situation, everyone is dealing with COVID on their own. Sometimes we're faced with a very simplistic solutions to very complex problems. And this is the Trojan horse that we're using. And we're looking at local actors and local governance. When looking at politics, quite often at the local level, when we're looking at women, youth, the governed, these groups are really bearing the brunt of political decisions which can lack in terms of being based on data. We are really looking at eradicating this, eliminating this, and increases in 50% of XYZ without really looking at what resources are available, what adaptation is available, because what works in Chad doesn't work in Chad, and what works in Matam and Senegal doesn't work in Dakar. So there really is a set of policies which quite often can be challenging because governments don't have the time to provide the best policies. And in my experience, I know that there is no perfect formula. There's no there's no one solution which can be applicable everywhere. Everyone needs to look at different instruments, different solutions, different challenges, and find solutions which are applicable to them and could always be strengthened, better, can be improved, better improved, and applicable. This also needs to be made in the context of pressure due to urgency and in the respect of available resources, as well as in the respect with compliance, really, with local local approaches. Bashir, I would like to ask you to be, as courteous as Senegalese people can be, but as diligent and staunch as, as in the Netherlands, because this is quite a short amount of time to speak of this issue, so please, Bashir, do remind you of time. This presentation will not be about finding perfect solutions, but to really start somewhere and build together. And quite often you will see that those amongst you who are local governance actors can start somewhere, find a problem to act upon. And I used to tell my friend, late Abdoulaye Sadio, you're going to be the mayor of Goudon. You're going to work 24/7. And at the end, people are only going to remember what you haven't done instead of what you have done. I believe and I hope that people do remember his memory in Goudon, and may his soul rest in peace. I would really like to also, salute his memory. So we're going to speak of my first slide, who are the youth, who are the children, and maybe the first I would like
to highlight the weight of the
power
youth
of the youth
on the continent. The percentage of the youth on the continent is high, and the demographic rate is also high, especially in West Africa, where every 25 or 30 years, the population doubles. In Senegal, 50 years ago, I said 50 years in Senegal, just 4 million habitants, but now we are 18 million people. Just in 50 years, the population of Senegal has increased by 4. So you can see that how the population is growing exponentially with young ones, children that need medical care, that need support. Something else I would like to add in my presentation is that we tend to think about young people and children as beneficiaries, as targets. That is a risk. We do feel that they're like a time bomb, that this youth population is a risk. That for me, I think that we should look at it differently. We should view them as resources, as the foundation of a strong society, a foundation for the development of our continent. We should change our perspective. We should view them as stakeholders that will help us leverage development. We should harness their capacity. In fact, in reality, they are citizens. They're part and parcel of the citizenship. They have their rights, they have their responsibilities right from birth, and that should be taken into account. Next slide. I think we have diversity as well. We tend to link vulnerable groups to everything as if it's a homogeneous group. No, there is a lot of diversity. And one of the messages that should get across for all stakeholders is that we should take the time to understand the various groups in the society, to take the time to know the children, to listen to them. The children are not just children that go to school, children on the street, children, they have their personalities, they are faced with various factors of vulnerabilities. So it's not just about a blanket definition that should be given. And since there are various factors of vulnerability, we have to look into them, though they can converge, of course. And then in terms of vulnerability, we have early marriage, we have factors such as handicap, we have factors in relation to the location. We have vulnerability linked to schooling or not schooling. So there's that advocacy for us to be more attentive to this group of population and understand their specificities and their capacities. For example, Senegal, as in other parts of Africa, there is a social net, there's an informal way of taking care of children, though not documented, that makes children to be resilient. And we know that these vulnerable groups, the best way to support is solidarity, community solidarity. And that's what we can see in African societies. That's how people tend to make it in life, because there's a society, there are people around. For example, my friend Gary Ndao wrote a book that, modern European countries, developed countries, they have their castles, they have mansions. But for us, our resource is the community. There's that solidarity, that communal relationship that exists in Africa. And then we should develop in our own way, and Africa is moving forward. So that dichotomy of North-South development, we should just put it aside. Next slide, please.
Et puis, il y a, j'ai juste présenté ici pour...
Here you can see something just to build on the thoughts, because this notion of deficit, risk, and threat should not be the only prism we look through. The young ones bring in a lot into the society. They are resilient, they are tenacious, they are motivated to work, they are imaginative, they are creative. They want to work, they have the energy. So that motivation should be channeled. And young ones, children, of course, in terms of values, traditional values, there is a foundation that we could use to build them. Well, as I was saying, of course, young ones, they have their first strength. They also have their weak points. They could be easily be manipulated. And as I've listed some of their weak points here, you can go through them later on. Next slide. In terms of demography, I've taken that of Senegal, and of course, this reflects what happens in other countries on the continent. But these are the data of Senegal. You can see the last numbers we have of Senegal. 48% of the population are below 18 years, 70% below 35 years. So we can see the future of our society should take into account young ones. If we design strategies without taking into account this group of young ones, it may mean Waterloo. So we should be building strategies that will help us to harness this young population. We know that Senegal in 2022, in terms of budget, we are around 4,245,000,000 in terms of expenditure, and per capita we are around 240,000 francs CFA. So all that expenditure include debt payment and other expenditure of the government. So you can see, even if we add any other thing, we are around 250 or maximum 350,000 per capita. And here we are not talking about remittances from family members outside the country, because it's been noted that remittances are even contributing more to the resources people gain in their countries. And we know that in terms of expenditure of the government, there are a lot of things to do, a lot of infrastructure to build, a lot of basic services as well. But it's good that in all these things, we have to take into account the contribution of young ones. Let's move on quickly. Next slide. This gives you a snapshot of the age pyramids in Francophone Africa. And you can see more or less that at the base, the youth and young ones have taken the lion's share. You have 5 minutes. Yes, let me go very quickly. So this shows, this is a drawing to show that children should be at the heart of any strategy. Next slide. So what are the position opportunities for young? I've listed them here. There are formal possibilities, elections, and then we, in some localities, in some municipalities, we can see that the elected officials are getting younger. So the new leaders that are much more charismatic and much prone to the media, even though young ones don't have a lot of credibility, but we could see that they are progressively taking up leadership roles. We have the local development plans. These are an opportunity. And once more, tools are just a means, not the end. So we should always be using the tools to ensure that we have participatory and inclusive approach to ensure that especially young ones do take part in local government processes. We have, I talked about participatory budgeting, which is the tool. So it's important that we ensure that this tool really helps and facilitates the inclusion of young ones. So we have the Municipal Council of Children. We have voluntary platforms where young ones could involve themselves, such as associative and sportive groups, hygiene communities, community radios. So, so we have the label tradition as well that helps to ensure that young ones do participate in voluntary activities. Even in Burkina Faso, there is such tradition where young ones could positively be involved and contribute to communities. We have citizen control, for example, school, that should be watched at school. So these are opportunities. And we have nurseries, we have elementary school. These are classes where children that where we could harness the potentials of students and young ones who want to take leadership roles. I'm not going to move into detail here, but just to add that if we want to involve children and young ones and vulnerable groups, we should be on their side. We should be in their shoes. We know that at the national levels, we have planning platforms, we have all those entities, but they should be adapted, contextualized, adapted to the needs of young ones. So young ones and children should be at the heart of projects that are meant for them. So they should be involved at all the levels of planning, implementation, and monitoring and evaluation of projects. Next slide. So let me talk about challenges. Resources are challenges, they are limited, even budgets as well are not expansive enough to include social programs that are favorable to young ones. We know that resources are always an issue here in our context. Without enough resources, we see that children may not have what it takes to keep on growing and maturing. And then we have weak policies in terms of diagnostics, data, ambitious and aspirational goals, which are limitative when it comes to the policies and their inclusivity of young ones. And then we have the limits in terms of the quality coverage of institutions and services that affect young ones. There's also a lack of reciprocal trust, so to speak. There's a big gap between promises and realizations of policy makers. We have also young ones and the youth that are taking up responsibilities, that are taking up the floor, though it's not very common, but we see young ones more and more are now being vocable, sharing their opinions, even sometimes contradictory opinions. But that's important. That's important. The young ones, of course, the constraint of tradition, respect, and responsibility is there, but we see that they could rise above such challenges. And then there's also that view that young ones will always remain young. And that, unfortunately, makes young ones not to assess all those roles that the adults could give them. In conclusion, I think we should change our view of children and young ones. We should not always view them as people that have rights and that we should protect their rights. We should give them the floor. We should give them opportunities to be vocal. We should develop spaces and methods for intergenerational dialogues, for exchange. There are many ways, there are many examples that could inspire us. And this takes me to the third point. We should assess promising experiences and good practices and build on them based on evidence. We've done some things in Senegal. Why not assess those projects that we've been implementing on young ones and with young ones? So I'm encouraging you to be part of this National Association of Evaluation. We have a thematic on youth, we have a thematic on gender, and we have debates. So come and join this association. Procedures should be lightened when it comes to planning and implementation, and they also should be adapted. Plans and projects should also involve young ones. And we know that if projects that affect young ones, if we want those projects to succeed, we definitely need to involve young ones. And we should know that youths and young ones are the future. So that should be on our mind. We should not always think that young ones will always remain young. So I have a lot of things to share with you, a lot of documentation. I'm going to share links with you and Mr. Chairperson, you've been very understanding. I'm sure that I've talked a lot, and thank you very much. Thank you for given me the floor. Thank you very much, Ian, for your presentation. Yes, of course, you went beyond your allotted time, but it was for the good cause. Because even for me, I didn't know if I should stop you, I should allow you to carry on, because it was an enriching presentation, very interested, well articulated, especially. We started with facts for 50 years. We have been asking ourselves, we started up in 1972. So it shows that we should not always be looking at the cosmetic effect. Let us look into the root causes of our problem. So it's good you took us into the past, and then you also highlighted some of the crises the world is going through, including Africa. And we talked about the insufficiency of national policies that are inclusive of young ones. And also found something that caught my fancy. When we talk about young ones, 48% are less than 18 years. And you say 76 are less than 35 years. I don't know if we really understand what it means. 76, which means 4 people you meet, 3 are young. That's what it means. 4 people you meet on the street in Africa, 3 are young. So this should prick the conscience of policy makers. We talked about listed some positioning opportunities with elections, development plans, local development plans, communal plans. You talk about participatory budgeting approaches. You talked about voluntary spaces that young ones should be involved in. And you talked about the case of Senegal and the traditions of solidarity. Of course, this is reflective of what is happening in other countries. And then you talked about the need not to always be working according to emergency. We should go long term, because for 50 years now, maybe we have been myopic. We are always addressing emergency. That's why we have not looked beyond to look into structural causes. And your conclusion was very interesting, that we should review our view of young ones, the need to move into intergenerational dialogues, and the need to assess and evaluate projects related to youth. So thank you very much for this presentation that touched various aspects. I'm not going to talk further, otherwise participants will not have a question to ask. So now let me open the floor for any who would like to take it. And of course, I'd like to thank sincerely Jan Wood and Madam Churosar for your presentation. So we have a few minutes to debate on this. So anybody that raises their hand will be given the floor. So I would be giving the floor until the conclusion of our meeting. So now let's give the floor to Zachary Ibrahim. Greetings to all.
Bonjour.
Zachary, good morning. You have the floor. We have listened with much interest of the presentations on this current topic. This the issue about positioning opportunities of youth, women, and vulnerable groups when it comes to management of local government in Africa. Let me talk about Niger. I would like to share my modest thoughts on this. When it comes to women in Niger, we say that women have a law on quota that imposes a certain number when it comes to local entities. Women have to be taken into account in decision-making bodies. So that's why in Niger, we have many women who are municipal councillors. We have women that are mayors, and that's new, thanks to that law. And for the young ones, though, and for people with handicap, there's no such law, no law on quota that facilitates their positioning in decision-making bodies.
Celui de la direction politique de ces collectivités-là lors des élections. Maintenant, on y va au niveau des actions de développement.
Let's talk about development actions like planning at the local government level. For Niger, we have the communal development law plan, and this is about participatory budgeting at local level. This is implemented during budgeting phases, and during those periods, women are given opportunities to share their concerns. They are given the voice so that their interests and concerns are taken into account during the planning and during the design of the annual budget. So at the municipal levels, women are given really that platform to ensure that their concerns are taken into account. However, for municipalities that don't follow this approach, unfortunately, these vulnerable groups don't have the opportunity to share their concerns, their interests, and to have their voice included in the budgetary process. That's what I wanted to say. For Niger, it's a major challenge. We still have a long way to go.
Zachary,
Zachary, if you have a question, you can share also your question as well. Oh, no, it's just an experience I wanted to share.
Zachary, bon, on ne peut pas partager l'expérience dans le truc.
We cannot share experience here at the moment. If there's a question for the two presentations, you could ask, so others who are waiting also could take the floor.
Je n'ai pas de questions à poser.
I don't have a question to ask, just a contribution to make. Thank you. You can also put your reference in the chat so that those who are interested in the experience of Niger could have it. Let's give the floor to Aji Chow.
C'est bien elle. Aji, oui.
Exactly, Aji. Thank you, Bashir, for having given me the floor on this topic that is timely, because we talk a lot about mobilization of women and the youth on the management of our cities. And my colleague Chorisa and Jan, I would like to commend them for their enriching presentation. I followed them with a lot of interest. Let me start with Jan. That we have oh, there's some microphones that are on.
Ceux qui n'ont pas la parole.
Those that don't have the floor, if you could mute your mics, please. Adim, can you help to mute those who don't have the floor?
Voilà, si vous pouvez couper.
Please mute your mics so that we can hear you.
Khadim Ibra, bon, je n'ai pas la possibilité de désactiver leur micro. Bon, faites-le à ma place.
So Hadim, I don't have that possibility now. You can. So after the greetings and commendation, I would like to say that in Yoff, that's a municipality where I am a municipal councillor. We've tried that we've really succeeded in this intergenerational alternative, because we have the youngest mayor, 34 years old, and young people who never thought they would have such power are now there. And now we are trying to exist, because this is a traditional village of labor. We are young people young people that could take the floor should be around 55 years. So imagine, so there's always a intergenerational conflict already, where we live in a very traditional village. In that traditional village, the youngest person to take the floor in the midst of adults should be around 55 years. So imagine having a mayor that is 35 years old, the challenge he has to face. There's a question that I saw in the chat board that is along the line that, okay, you have succeeded in having that law on gender equality, but in reality, how is it reflected? Of course, we have challenges, and that's why we are making we are asking all frameworks such as the civil society organizations to ensure that we continue to rise above the challenges, ensuring that women are more and more represented, to inviting frameworks and platforms to join us, and political parties also to join us, and allow the young ones and the youth and women to take some position of authority. And if you can remember what happened in the House of Assembly, we know that this last assembly, National Assembly, well, we don't know if it's going to be respected or not, but the previous one, the absolute gender equality wasn't respected. Well, there's a law on that. I think also, in addition to that absolute gender equality, we should look into the quality of representativity, because the risk is that we may elect women and then they will be criticized of not being competent. So that's why that aspect should be looked into. The right people should be chosen, should be at the head. They should have the capacity to govern.
Faire des résultats palpables en termes
So that aspect is important, because when we talk about women that should take up roles of responsibility, we should look at their profiles as well, so that they also achieve results. I'm going to stop here so that other people could take the floor. So for in summary, I want quality, not just representativity. Thank you.
Monsieur Kanute,
the speaker is on mute.
Excusez-moi, le micro était désactivé.
Apologies, my microphone was muted. Thank you very much, Adi, for your intervention. You could give the floor to Denis Bertrand, who I believe is joining us from Congo. Thank you, Bashir, and good morning to everyone. My name is Denis Bertrand Onga. I'm the coordinator of the association in Congo-Brazzaville. I just wanted to share something regarding the topic at hand today, meaning youth, women, and vulnerable groups, what opportunities of positioning in local governments. You have 3 minutes, please, to speak. You have 3 minutes for your intervention. So I just wanted to say that in my country, we do have mechanisms which foster the participation of vulnerable groups, such as the youth and women, in decision-making bodies. The first mechanism that I would like to share is a decree, is a presidential decree, which implements management committees in each village and each neighborhood across the country. And these committees are implemented in order to foster the participation of different groups of the population, and also participate in planning and managing local territory. So these are proximity organizations which work with local governments, with villages and neighborhoods across the country.
Regardez un peu, il nous fait un total de 3900.
In our country, we're talking about 3,900 villages and neighborhoods. And this is quite a big number. And we can see that in these different areas, the different representatives and the majority of the population is young. Whether we're talking of the youth or women, we're talking of people who can now play a role in decision making. The other mechanism that I wanted to share in Congo are the consultative councils, which were implemented thanks to the 2015 constitutions. And there are 6 that I can share. There is the Consultative Youth Council, which is a body implemented in order to foster the participation of the youth in decision making. And I am actually and this council also plays a consultancy, a council role with the president of the republic. There's also the Women's Consultative Council and the Civil Society Consultative Council. There's also a law, a draft law on gender equality. And we've seen in July 2020 that a lot of young people were elected in the local elections, general elections. And if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about quite a big number of people who are between 35 and 45. Thank you. Thank you very much. For those who would like to take the floor, I would really like to invite you to prioritize questions for our panelists. I know that there are lots of good examples from different countries, but unfortunately, today's webinar does not allow us to share experiences from everyone. So please prioritize questions. Now I'm going to give the floor to Palasal. Good morning, everyone. Tala, you have the floor. Thank you. Thank you very much to the different panelists. The topic is also very interesting. I have really listened to the presentations with quite a big interest. And what I would like to share regarding this, what I would like to ask is, what are the different parameters and mechanisms which allow to involve the women, the youth, and vulnerable groups in decision-making instances? Second question, which are the different statutes according to which municipal councils should have the prerogative to include the youth in community development? These are my 2 questions, because we are seeing today that quite a lot of youth have projects that do not participate when they go to town halls. They don't benefit that really help with development, but do not benefit from support, local support. So is there a strategy for these youth to really participate and benefit from support and their participation of community development? Thank you very much. Thank you, Tala. Now let's give the floor to Sen. Sen, you have the floor. I suppose that you are giving the floor to me, Chancel. Good morning, everyone. I am a project coordinator within an NGO in the region of Kolda in Senegal. Thank you very much to the different panelists as well as the organizers. When I saw the topic at hand today, youth, women, and vulnerable groups, I thought about people living with disabilities. And I believe that Mrs. Sa spoke of the social orientation law of 2019. And I am actually quite pleased that she spoke of this law. And regarding Mr. Ian, Mr. Yan's presentation, he spoke of the youth and children and regarding the involvement of these vulnerable groups. I believe that we didn't mention people living with disabilities, and that would really would have allowed us to take into consideration their concerns and also to foster the participation in the management of local governments and also of decision-making bodies. So I would like to ask Madame Sa,
dans le sens d'impliquer
which projects and which actions were implemented in order to improve the participation of people living with disabilities in decision-making bodies. Thank you, Janssen, for your question. We are now going to give the floor to Modedzi. Modedzi Bona, you have the floor. Modedzi Bona, are you here?
Vous m'écoutez? Oui. Je salue tous les panélistes.
So, good morning to all our panelists. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask my question. I would like to ask, where are you calling from, Mr. Bona? I am the president of the organization AGDH, and I am calling from Togo. I would like to ask this question to Mr. Yan, given that he has quite a global vision on African issues. I would like to ask, when speaking of the youth, because it is quite a broad basis, I would like to know if our governments are really involved with the youth. And I would like to know if our governments are really invested in the youth. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are now going to give the floor to Ibrahim Adja. Good morning. Good morning. My name is Ibrahim Adja. I am a project officer at IOPD Africa for I would like to really congratulate Yan and his homage to Mr. Balagay. I believe it is very important to remind that. And when speaking of participatory budgeting as well, I have quite a few questions to ask, so I will try and be brief. Regarding the tools and approaches to development in really fostering women and youth when talking of real estate, we are looking at issues here. And I might have a question for Madame Sa. She spoke of the legal framework which was implemented in Senegal. It is quite a progressive one, but I would like to know if she has highlighted shortcomings that hinder the participation of women. And also regarding what Yan was saying earlier, it is true that we have tools which you serve as mechanisms, but we also have local mechanisms as well that are not government mechanisms. Should we maybe try and formalize these local initiatives, which can sometimes be more relevant? Would he believe that it could be important to move more towards that rather than just banking on government initiatives? And he mentioned capitalizing experiences, and I believe that it is very important and to really work in network synergies. I would just like to remind that in Senegal, there's a program financed by Benzed, which helps with the operating of women's initiatives. And I wanted to ask, how is it possible to create synergies in an ecosystem where so many women are really activists for women's rights. I have other questions, but I believe that maybe I should end here. Thank you very much, Ibrahim Aja, for these questions, which are well noted. We are now going to give the floor to Sheikh Tidiane Ndiaye. Sheikh Tidiane Ndiaye, are you here? Do you have questions for our two panelists? Sheikh Tidiane, you have the floor. Sheikh Tidiane is not here. Maybe he has technical issues. I am going to give the floor to Juliette. I suppose it's Juliette Saleh from Ghana. Juliette, welcome.
Yeah, Bashir, hello, how are you?
I'm fine.
Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, thank you very much for this program. I'm very excited because, as you know, these are issues we are trying to handle at the level of United States and local government of Africa. Okay, let me introduce myself to those who don't know me. My name is Dr. Juliette Saleh. I'm Regional Director for West Africa for the United States and local government of Africa. I'm also the advisor to the president of REFELA, which is a local elected women's network of Africa. So I just wish to say, Bashi, you know that this particular webinar is so timely as we are just coming from our Congress in Daejeon, where the United Nations is promoting the path for the future of people, planet, and governments, where the key notion is to rethink and reshape governance systems into more inclusive ones. Also, right now at the United States and local government of Africa, we are trying to promote feminist municipalism, where there is a need to put care and sustainability of life at the heart of policy and action. Next week in Tangier, we are going to have a general assembly for all young mayors of Africa. You also know that we have a very strong network of women called REFELA. Now, the issue, Jan talked about something very, very important that if we are discussing women, political leadership and youth, we forget. I do think that we forget. We try to build their capacity. We talk about the need for resources, education, and all kinds of things. We forget that in our African tradition, we don't let youth talk in public, in the midst of elders. We don't let women talk when men are around. Jan mentioned it, and he tried to talk about intergenerational dialogue. But then I think that it is important for us to start looking at that particular aspect, because in almost all literature, my PhD is on women political leadership, but you hardly see that part of talk of patriarchism and the rest. But then women, when we sit in a group under a tree, in our traditions, we don't let women talk. We don't let youth talk. How will they come to political leadership if they cannot talk? So I want to think that we should try to look at that particular aspect that Jan mentioned in his presentation, which to me, it is very, very important. Also, I like the presentation of Madame Sawe. She talked about the law of 2010 and the law of the implementation of the law of 2011. So is it possible for us to actually take those laws and make it to touch on the youths as well? Because Senegal is the best example of increasing women political leadership in Africa. So how can we involve the youth to follow the same kind of system that Senegal has followed for women to increase women political leadership in Africa? Thank you very much, Bashir.
Merci, merci. Thank you very much, Juliette from UCLG. Sorry. Okay,
so I am now going to come back to French. Thank you very much, Juliette, for this very edifying intervention, and also really speaking of our current context and everything that your organization, UCLG, is doing, and the different connections Both panelists have taken note of this and wish come back on this. Mamadi Kamara and John K, would you please prepare? Please remember that we need short interventions. So good morning to all. And I would like to first and foremost really thank our different panelists, the facilitators as well for their presentations. My question really is on one aspect. In our countries, in African countries, so many laws and conventions have been elaborated and ratified, but the implementation is really lacking. And I would like to know if through IOPD, is there a strategy which can really foster a common policy across the continent, which will allow to popularize good practices across different countries? Second, I would like to know regarding the implementation, the involvement, apologies, of the youth and women. Madame Sa said that in community councils and local governments, the involvement, the participation of youth and women within national councils. I would like to know if there is a policy because different countries are here, but often we will see that there's a generational conflict. So I would like to know, in the context of the different legal frameworks, such as the African Charter for the Youth and other conventions pertaining to women, is there a popularizing strategy for these conventions through the IOPD? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mamadi Kamara. We are now going to give the floor to Janke, and then Ibrahim Magnan is next. Good morning. Good morning. So, my name is Maria Masila. I am a holder of a degree of territorial development, local development from the University of Bombay. So I would like to say that right now, currently I am an intern with the Association of Local Producers of the Gambian River, and through the NGO Action Aid and their intervention area in the community of Misra, they have implemented a space which fosters women's sharing experiences and also popularizing leadership and women's rights. They apologies, I am a bit nervous about talking. They have implemented a system of autonomy for women through village cashiers, and these cashiers allow them to have access to a space to speak and be heard in decision-making bodies when they're invited, but also allow them financial autonomy, which allow them to implement income generating activities and also help and participate in their with their finances. I would like to know if there should be a regional strategy which will allow women and vulnerable groups to have access and decision making, but also if there should be a cross-cutting dimension in their participation. Thank you very much, Mayama, with insisting on the necessity, the need to share these experiences. Thank you, Jan spoke of it. I am now going to give the floor to Ibrahim Magnan, which I believe is joining us from Mauritania. Then we're going to give the floor to Fatima Tasso. Thank you very much, Mr. Bashir, and thank you to everyone including our two panelists, Madame Chorosa and Mr. Yan, for the relevance of their presentations. I am not going to be too long. I just have a small question regarding the presentation from Madame Chorosa on gender equality. I can see that there really is progress in terms of gender equality, and quite a few countries are taking Senegal's example and learning from Senegal's experience in terms of gender equality. But I would like to know if there has been a study on the basis of indicators which really show the participation of women in municipal councils and in the management of community services. I have a second question. You know, sometimes we're presented with percentages at the global level, but at the community level, are we really taking into account the participation of women in these instances? Thank you. Thank you very much, Ibrahim Mignon, for this question. I believe that Choro has written down your questions. We are now going to give the floor to Fatimata Aruna. So, thank you very much, Bashir. Thank you very much to our different panelists as well for this very edifying presentation. So I just wanted to share my experience within the framework of Choho's presentation. I believe that beyond the law on gender equality, the general code for local governance really brought about progress in young women's participation, notably through the citizen participation consecration. This allowed for participation frameworks such as neighborhood council and participatory budget as well. And we have quite a good representation of women and youth and vulnerable groups. So this really constitutes an opportunity. Now, the issue pertaining to gaps, quite often there are gaps, and unfortunately, this framework does not allow for a full implementation. So what I can suggest is really to look at a strategy which will allow for these frameworks to be more viable, because these frameworks really are very good involvement and engagement and participation frameworks. They could foster the development of local governments. So it is very important for these frameworks to be more viable. Thank you very much. Thank you, Fatimata. Now we are going to give the floor to Shaif Mulai Baji. Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone. I am going to go and ask my question away. I am part of a platform for land governments, and we don't really feel the involvement of the youth. It's because we don't listen to. When we are, given everything that was said here, in terms of their participation in development, the participation of the youth and vulnerable groups, but what decisions we take, what initiative can we take so that they can be more involved? Thank you very much. I'm now going to give the floor to Tem Nabulapa. Thank you very much for this opportunity to speak, and thank you as well to the panelists. I would like to ask a question to Madam regarding the National Women's Council in Senegal. Unfortunately, I couldn't hear. I believe I had network issues, when she was explaining the role played by the Women's National Council and Senegal, I would like to know what role they played in the implementation of laws at the national level in Senegal. What role they've played. I would also like to know if she's had experiences in presenting counter reports of what is happening at the national level on women's situation. I now understand that this committee is a state initiative, but it is autonomous, it is independent. I would really like to know more of their role at the national level. Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. Which country are you from?
Bon, j'ai perdu. Je n'ai pas entendu.
Apologies, we cannot hear her.
Ok, si vous avez l'occasion, vous pouvez le mettre sur le chat, comme ça nous permet.
If you can put it on the chat later. Thank you, Tim, for this question. I am now going to give the floor to Ibasa. Thank you very much, Bashir. Good morning to everyone. Can you hear me? Thank you very much for this invitation, and thank you for the two presentations, which I really followed with a lot of interest. And I noted that we're speaking quite a lot of a lack of dialogue, and also the refusal of women's participation from women in participating, and the shortcomings with the youth. We know that in Africa, despite policies and mechanisms of decentralization, which really are at the forefront of local government, it seems that populations and local governments are not very do not really understand issues of decentralizing. And despite policies and legal regulatory frameworks, we are really consecrating notions of participation, dialogue, exchange, whether it is from population or local governments. They do not really understand the different challenges. This could be due to the speed in implementing policies. And I would like to know if IOPD has a policy in place in order to allow for everything beyond legal frameworks, for a strategy to experiment that we could maybe share with different countries in order to allow the different actors of decentralizing and local governments to really take ownership and involve themselves in dialogue. You know, dialogue cannot only be expected from political actors because they also have their own shortcomings. And dialogue can be put on the table by women, by the youth. And I would like to know if there are different initiatives that were implemented in order to foster dialogue and for different actors to really take ownership of different policies. Thank you very much. Thank you, Basa. It is duly noted. Ajasu, you have the floor. Good morning. My name is Flor Laetitia Ajasu. I am a sociologist. I am also the secretary of the Association Design Togo.
C'est un sujet vraiment intéressant et d'actualité. Donc, j'aimerais savoir si, au-delà des lois et outils...
Very interesting and hot topic. So I would like to know that besides the legal frameworks that various governments have come up with on gender equality,
un accompagnement ou un...
does this program have a mechanism to support associations, community-based associations to build their capacity so that their interventions on gender equality would be improved and more efficient. Yes, we'll come back to that later on. So let me give the floor to Abdul Rashid. So I think after two more people, I think we are going to end the floor. We're going to stop the floor. So Rashid now.
Allez-y, Abdul Rashid.
Abdul Rashid.
Donc, moi, c'est Abdul Rashid.
My name is Abdul Rashid.
Également de formation, je suis secrétaire général.
We have been. I'm the general director of an education association. I'm going to be fast. My question is, of course, it has been addressed partly. I would like to know if at the IOPD level, if there is a system whereby young people could be capacitated or will be supported financially so that they will be able to be effective in their work at the communal level. You know, I was a candidate at the municipal election, the previous election in my country, but unfortunately, I didn't have the resources, and we had to fall back on the party that sponsored us. What we noticed that we were just put in front so that they will be able to achieve their interest, and when they achieve their interest, we were kicked out. So my question is, for young people who have programs who are aspiring for leadership position, do you have any mechanism to support them? Yeah, from which country, Abdul Rashid? I'm from Niger. Thank you. We've taken note of that question. Now let's give the floor to Ahmed Biomumuni. Abdul Rashid, you can bring down your hand. Greetings, I hope you can hear me clearly. My name is Ahmed Biomumuni from Benin Republic. I'm from the town halls of the youth in Benin. I'm the Secretary General of student of the Bianco municipality. I have a degree in sustainable development and local governance. My question is addressed to Madam Choro, who presented made a presentation on women. I'd like to say that the laws is simply on paper, but it should be enforced, because before we get to 50% of men and women, as she presented, though now we are at 44% participation in Senegal, I would like her to take note of the fact that at the local level, the women participation and leadership is not encouraged and facilitated. Let me take the example of Benin. Few girls are interested in politics, because when I was a student, I noticed that at that level, it's very hard to find a woman activist. So the question is, what could we do to motivate women to be activists, to be active in this in the field of politics? I would like also to talk about the participation of the youth. We know that it's always a challenge, because young people, the adults will always ask the question, are young people able to govern? So what are the measures that could be taken? And I'm asking the question to Jan. So what are the measures that could be taken to motivate young people or to invite young people to be involved? I know that in Benin with the new law, things are moving forward, things are changing, things are not like before, but we are not yet there. And to talk about the vulnerable group, I suggest that there should be a a training session, because it's not about people living with handicap. There are people who don't have the resources as well. So these are vulnerable people. So, for example, if people want to get employment, there's internship first. So how do we provide internship? How do we create a platform of favorable conditions for you, the youth and vulnerable ones will be supported in their internship? So thank you very much. Thank you, Amer. And the last person to take the floor is Iman Ferry. I guess he must be from Tunisia. Greetings. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very much happy to be here with you. My name is Men Ferry. I am at the municipality of Mansa. I'm the chairperson of the participatory budgeting group. And 2016, 2017, Bashi came here, and I participated in that workshop, a workshop of civil society and participatory budget. So I would like to address my question to the communication officer. Or women participate more actively in public life, and also youth are more involved in participatory budget and spaces of this colleague Rashid. Of course, there are problems of resources. So it's a big question mark. It's a major roadblock. So how, because you know, when young people don't have that resources, it could lead to corruption or other negative influences. So how can we improve the participation of young ones, especially young ones that don't like to participate in public life? So I think we should work on that. We should also work on children as well, because that's where things start. So thank you very much. Thank you for having given me the floor. Thank you, Iman, and thank you for the work you do in Tunisia, in the Marsa municipality of an open governance and participatory budgeting. We are following all the way from Dakar, and we are proud of what you do, and we want to encourage you to carry on. I would like to thank all those that took the floor. Now, let me go back to the two speakers, so the lady and the man, gender balance. Or if there are some questions, we heard some questions on mechanisms and some questions for IOPD, and I could address those. So let me just give you one at a time the floor. So let me start with Choro, then followed by Ian for your responses to the questions that have been asked on the floor. And bearing in mind that most of the interventions have been comments and experience sharing. Thank you once more, Mr. Kanute, for having given me once more the floor. I would like to really express my admiration for all the comments and the contributions that have been made from all various parts of Africa. And of course, there are possibilities to work in synergy, civil society organizations and local government officials as well. So the question that was asked, one of them is if the current National Assembly was gender balanced. No, because the president of the House of Assembly, Dr. Mam Abdougay. No, Maradou Diop, please. Sorry. The president, after president, we have the Abdoulaye Diouf, whereas according to the law on gender equality, you should be absolute in the bureaus and commissions. So this current House of Assembly and of the previous ones have not been compliant with the law. But the civil society is fighting to ensure that there is gender equality at all levels of decision taking, including the commissions. Another question that was asked by Ibrahim Majia about they're talking about laws on land access for women. We know Senegal, in its legal framework, the Constitution of 2021, says that woman has the right to access land according to these provisions of the law. But we know that there's a reality. The reality is not enforced. Unfortunately, women have challenges to access land in Africa, especially in Senegal, whereas we know that they play a key role in agriculture, and they are the workforce, the main workforce in the family farms. But unfortunately, their access to production factors such as land remains a challenge in basically all the territories of Senegal. Another question that was addressed to me by Mabrur Lala if COSEF is autonomous and independent, and what are the actions of COSEF. I would like to tell her that COSEF, I think there's another question, Fatima Arona, that asked similar question. I think I'm on the roles and experience of COSEF. So what you have to understand is this National Council of Senegal is funded by the states of Senegal. That said, it is an independent organization, and we are working to improve the status of women and to ensure that their rights are respected. We promote education, training, and information of women and their involvement in local governance, and to ensure that decentralization policies are really implemented. And in addition to those actions, we also create exchange visits and discussions among associations in West Africa, Africa, and the world. We are also working to ensure that that budgets being drafted are sensitive to gender. We also build the capacity of women and young women. And it's important to talk about young women because COSEF with partners, we are ensuring that young women's capacities are built by, we give them skills to empower them on leadership. And these women are also trained on participatory budgeting that is sensitive to gender. And in summary, COSEF is on various fronts when it comes to capacity building. Currently, COSEF with FAO, we are training women, young ones on local governance. We have the municipality of Konjo, we are training. Serenjob and Kungal, Catherine, and we have the municipality of Gulf Sud. So several municipalities have benefited from COSEF training, particularly on participatory budgeting that is gender sensitive, and we're also facilitating participatory democracy. I'm talking about gender. I will now link it to the question that I think it's who asked Mrs. Sen, if I'm not mistaken. And I would like to clarify here that in our training on participatory democracy sensitive to gender, we don't exclude vulnerable groups such as people living with handicaps. So we have consultation frameworks in municipalities where gender, of course, is taken into account, and all the various strata of the society are taken into account, be the people living with handicap, or aged people, young people, name them. All the people in the communities are involved and invited. Another question that was asked by Mr. Ibrahimian is on the percentage of women in municipalities. I would like to say that the election of 2022 in Senegal, hundreds of women were candidates, but at the end, only 20 were elected. That shows that, of course, there is some progress, though that the progress is marginal. But one thing is clear, that the participation of women during the previous local election in 2022 is a reality. And also the number of elected women has evolved positively from 2.5% before the election to 3.5%. So we can definitely see that there is at least some improvement. And after the local and departmental elections, 18 mayors were elected, in addition to communal councillors that are women. 20-something in total have been elected. We wish this to go beyond. That said, we have to agree that there is progress. We can also notice that women, after the death of the cocaine mayor, the replacement was a woman. And when the town hall mayor of Dakar was condemned, it was a woman that took office. So these are pieces of evidence of progress that we should not gloss over. I think we have answered some of the questions on land ownership and access. Yes, we said that, yes, we've answered that question. We also had the question of Ahmed Woumeni, who talked about local authorities. She asked the question on what are the measures that could be put in place to motivate women to take up leadership role. Yes, I talked about challenges that Madam Imen from Tunisia highlighted. There are challenges. And even in my presentation, and even Professor Yan also highlighted them in his presentations when talking about young people. And the challenges are capacity building, training. Why capacity building? Because women are often marginalized when it comes to politics because they don't have the skills. And the lady just talked about that when she took the floor. And also this is the challenge, especially to motivate women with managerial skills to move into politics and take leadership roles. and the intervention of Mr. Momini that talked about women who are not interested in politics. I think all of us, in one way or the other, we're into politics. Women should be interested in politics. Everybody should be interested in politics, in as much as participation in politics is unavoidable. If we take women, for example, women have a key role to play in the Senegalese state because half of the population are women, right? And not only are half of the population are women, in addition, unfortunately, we have roadblocks limiting their participation. So it's not because they don't want to participate in politics, but there are those barriers that are preventing them from doing such. So, yeah, please, could you round up? So, from Tunisia, Imen Fari talked about capacity building. And you even talked about the capacity building that you received from Mr. Bashir Kanute on participatory budgeting. So that's it. That's what we are talking. We also at COSEF, we've trained young people, we've trained women in several municipalities so that we empower women to participate. Even in the rural area, you know that women are reluctant to participate in politics. But when COSEP trained these women on empowerment, leadership, communication, they gained in confidence, and that moved them to go and take up some leadership roles. Thank you very much, Mr. Kanute. And unfortunately, I was a bit long because we had several questions and very interesting questions. So thank you for having given me the floor. Thank you, Choro, for that and for your responses to the questions. Now, let me give the floor to Jan. So if possible, if we could try to synthesize all the questions. Thank you, Bashir. I will try to be brief and summarize. I think a part of the question is related to information access. It's true that there's that deficit in information and communication. People don't know how to access funding. People don't understand the provisions, both national and international, on vulnerable people. So there's that general need for information. So which means that if we could work on that, if in the various areas, you can find a hall you can equip, maybe with a computer, with internet access, and encourage young elected ones and young ones and representatives of young ones and associations to use such center, a center for information, a center for exchange and reflection, because that's how people will gain knowledge and gain information, because a lot's happening right now. And of course, we have partners that could support in putting up such spaces. And then in addition to that, we should build on networking. Things have moved forward because of relationships, because of networks. So elected officials should talk to private sector, should talk to agencies in the mining sector, various stakeholders, try to build contacts, develop exchange and networks. Though, unfortunately, we are buried in our daily work, we feel that we don't have the time to build relationship, to get to know people. No. When you get to meet people, you may find part of these solutions to some of your problems. Of course, vulnerability and vulnerable groups, we didn't touch much on that because we didn't have much time. For example, people living with handicap, yes, they are really touched, but you know that a lot of progress has been done with a lot of advocacy when it comes to access to school and to buildings. And one of the measures major progress that could be done would be at the family level. Those cultural barriers, when at the family level, they are being broken down, when those vulnerable people with handicap could access healthcare, these are progress, and areas of progress that should be noted. Of course, you talked about resources, and we know that those resources are going to education, healthcare, buying books. We have actions in various areas, but it's true that when it comes to employment, we don't have many actions from the government. Maybe the advocacy could be that we should let the government prioritize, for example, employment, not just be focusing on some priorities, just balance out. People, young ones, children, vulnerable groups should be taken into account in policies so that they be more adapted, better designed, and well implemented. Of course, there are some initiatives from the government of Senegal, like sending money, like small stipends given to poor families. Yes, these are initiatives. I think that government should widen out. We talked about laws. Yes, it's true. Laws are not enough. If these laws are not supported by other provisions and mechanisms, things don't go forward. And especially if the spirit of the laws and decrees are not understood, well, those laws and decrees are just kept in the drawers. I'd like to say also, at the micro level, things are being done, but unfortunately, they are not visible. And my advocacy is that things that are happening at the micro level, meso level, should find a way to be expressed and to get some visibility. And that could be one of the contributions of the government in highlighting things happening at the grassroots level. I think the other questions also, I've tried to summarize. One thing is there's no perfect formula. We should continue, we should be tenacious, we should be resilient. We should also be looking at what is happening in the other municipality, in other countries. We should not just reinvent the wheel. We should see the good practices from elsewhere and espouse them. And unfortunately, also another problem is that we don't have enough institutional memory, because elected officials, they come and go. It's as if things have to be redone and restarted. So these are some challenges, and I've just tried to share some of my ideas with you. But as I said, we have a thematic group on evaluation of Senegal, and I'll be happy to see you join this association. And you have my address, you can write to me. Yes, we have heard you, and as I said, please, all the participants, please join this group. It's an interesting association working on evaluating policies. So please find a way to be interested in the activities of this national association. There are 2-3 questions that were addressed to IOPD, and I would like to address them. One is the necessity for IOPD to work with policies and documents that have been ratified by our states but have not been enforced. So the question is, how do we make our states that sign a lot of documents and ratify a lot of treaties move beyond that? Yeah, that's one of our domains, one of the fields we are working on. And in fact, we will have to continue working on that, working with states in collaboration with all the civil society organizations in various countries, so that we move into more advocacy and more influence. Because states that just sign and just ratify, and unfortunately don't go beyond such to enforce those legal frameworks, yes, we push them to do that. So that's one of our missions. The second question is on access to resources. Jan talked about it partly. Resources on knowledge. For example, Choro talked about training on various thematics, like those sensitive to gender, and one of the speakers talked about resources for people living with handicap. Yes, there are documents on that, and they can access those. So why not go on the side of the observatory? You're going to see several documents that are available that will help you understand the mechanisms and help you to see, if you want to work with local government and local authorities, how to go about it, so that the gender components will be taken into account, youth, women will be taken into account, people living with handicaps would also be taken into account, because they have a set of rights. Yes, and those rights have to be taken into account, and all these are in the documents. The third question for IOPD is on capacity building. There are two aspects. We have technical aspects. We are going to continue working on that. I think Adim will share the information on the next sessions to be organized.
Women has shared her experience of Tunisia, which we have supported. We can also speak of international gatherings as well. Our next session on participatory budgets, which will lead to a certification, a certified training. Our different colleagues could share to spread this information for all those who might be interested and would want to participate or even just register to be able to attend the international session. There are different topics such as this, which will constitute trainings on capacity building, on leadership, for example, participatory budgets, prevention and fight against corruption, conflict resolutions. There are very many topics which are available and on which we intervene across the different countries and on the international aspect. Now, looking at financial resources, it is true that IOPD does not have the resources in order to foster youth participation in decision-making bodies. We know that this is a limitation for us, but what we can help with is connecting the youth to different initiatives which would like to help the youth to participate in such instances. As of now, the IOPD does not have mechanisms and resources in order to support the youth. There is a need for it. We know that this need is existent and that we would like to help, but we do not have a mechanism in place yet. But we can definitely help with connecting youth with different foundations who would like to help the youth participate in decision making. I would like to finish here because it is 12:36. I know that Valerie Loba, I don't know if they could follow all of the communications and interventions. I would like to maybe give him the floor. Yes. So unfortunately, Valerie could not join us because of health issues, but he has asked so that we provide him with the recording of the Unfortunately, Valerie could not follow us from Côte d'Ivoire and provide us with a summary of this webinar. And then we will send this summary to all of the participants. I hope with your different emails, if you can have access to different the different webinars, they will be online on our website. Personally, I'm duly noting all of the recommendations which emanated from this meeting, notably the ones on strengthening networking, and to also not forget the private sector, which is an essential actor. We also look at different skills and how to articulate them. That means, how do we connect the initiatives which are led by the youth and women, as well as local governments at the departments or regional or even international levels? And how do we work on this in order for these different levels to work in synergy? And I believe that IOPD can move forward with the work, which I believe is really essential. I would also like to thank Choro for all of the shared information and the work that you do, which you could share with, throughout the work that you do with the women, and that you connect with the national level and decision makers at the national level. I would also like to thank all the panelists, all of the different participants. Unfortunately, some of you cannot take the floor. I know that quite a lot of questions were asked in the chat. Hadim will help me to include all of these questions in the report, which will be shared. And eventually, we can continue with the debate on the forum. I would maybe just like to end by saying, by talking of the next steps. On the next steps.
La prochaine. Voilà.
So here, if everyone can see my screen, our next webinar, which will be held on November 24th, will be on the fostering of human rights, inclusion, and good governance. Which role can civil society and citizens play? I believe that some questions were asked today, notably how to involve and foster lives and participation of people living with disabilities. And when we are looking at the involvement of human rights, we can also speak of that. This will be held in a month, exactly on Thursday, November 24th, and hopefully all who have participated today and are registered on the platform will be able to participate. And the ones who would like to have access to our activities, as well as documentation, videos, films on different aspects, as well as the reports that we receive from our different partners, can register on IOPD's website in order to have access to all these resources, and as well as the training sessions that we have. I would like to stop here and really thank Mrs. Chosa for her very edifying participation. Really thank Mr. Ian Hopwood as well for their very insightful presentation and the different recommendations that he could share with really a very experienced opinion from 1972 to today, what can be done and what should be done on the different topics we're working on. We hope that Valerie will heal soon. And I would like to also just ask everyone to turn on their camera so that we can take a group photo. Now, thanks to the digital world, we don't need to ask the short ones to be in the front and the tall ones at the back. Everyone just needs to turn on their cameras so that we can take a group photos. I would like to thank all the participants and the technical team as well. I asked for the cameras to be turned on, not the microphones. So please activate your cameras, but turn off your microphone so that we can move forward. Thank you, Yan. Thank you, Cho, for your very interactive presentations and your interactions with the participants. Thank you as well to our technical team for organizing this seminar, which lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. Thank you to everyone and hopefully see you soon. Thank you.